Welcome back, guys. So today I've got a brand new controller to take a look at, the Brawler 64 wireless gamepad. And I already know some of you guys are probably saying, wait, we've already looked at that. That already exists. This is a new version for use with the Nintendo Switch and in smaller letters and PC. So that is what this is intended for. It comes with a 2.4 gigahertz wireless dongle that is a USB dongle. And I have a lot to say about this. So I've covered a lot of Retro Fighters products in the past, and generally they've been fairly positive reviews for the most part, and that may change today. I have a lot to say about this thing. Holy crap. So they did recently put out their Brawler 64 wireless controller for the Nintendo 64, and that only came with a Nintendo 64 dongle. So if you want to use this on other devices that use USB, this is the one. It's currently on sale on Retro Fighters website and CastlemaniaGames.com, but got to get this thing out of the way and explain what my issue is, because I do have a pretty big issue with this controller. So next gen controller, 2.4 gigahertz, compatible with PC, Mac, and Switch. Can also be used like on Mister and whatnot, pretty much any USB device. And I do have to say, my review here is specifically to do with the use of the Nintendo Switch. That's the biggest word on there. And I think that's going to be one of the bigger appeals. But using it on PC or Mister or anything like that, I think this controller is more suited towards that. So if you like the feel of the Brawler 64, you like the styling, it works fine on those devices. But on the Switch, wireless range 30 feet, dual Z triggers, responsive analog. Let's get into it. Let's open this thing. So here we go. So let's take a look. Here is the controller. Immediately, I know some people may nitpick, and it's not a huge deal to me, but it kind of breathes life into, you know, what my issues are, where they may have came from generally. But you have a turbo and a clear button. There is no turbo or clear functionality with this controller. Those two buttons function as something else. Turbo on the Switch is going to be minus, the start is plus, and then clear is home. So it's the same exact mold from the previous version, the wireless version for the Nintendo 64. There you go. Wireless USB edition. USB-C for charging. Takes, I believe, a couple hours to fully charge if it's dead, and you get over 10 hours battery life. Comes with this little manual, some thank you customer service stuff. It does go over all the button assignments for the X input, D input, and for the Nintendo Switch. And for me, that's where the problem is with the Nintendo Switch with the button assignment. And we'll get more into that in a second, but there you go. All the buttons and what they do, how to pair, pretty simple. Just hold the start button, plug it in, and you're good to go. Comes with USB-C for charging, so you do get the cable. Get a little keychain guy. Let me open this bad boy up. There he is. I think this is a different one. Typically, you get a different one with each controller that you get from them, or different variations of controllers, different colors come with a different guy. This is a guy that came with this one, so there you go, a little bonus item. And then the final thing in the box is the USB dongle. So this USB dongle, focus on it, it actually looks pretty nice. I like the way it looks. It does have a little cap that you'll probably lose. I'll lose it most likely, but there you go. Plug it into the Switch, your PC, whatever you want, and you're good to go. I'm a big fan of just using the original controllers for the system. Sometimes people like to have alternatives, and that's fine. That's why I like covering a lot of stuff like that. But yeah, I'm biased towards just using what the console maker made, besides the Joy-Cons. I hate the Joy-Cons, but the Pro Controller, no problem for me using this for most of my gaming. But like I said, some people may like this form factor, may even be like, hey, like this might be like great for like Mario All-Stars or the Nintendo 64 games that are going to be on the Switch Online service. And we have an issue. So let's go ahead and plug this in, get it synced up. So you see a little light, probably see a little light flashing. Just hold the start button. I think we're synced. Yeah, we're synced. So the one thing, if you can't get it synced right away, the D-pad and the analog stick function just fine. We try to focus in on the monitor a bit more, but if your controller, if you ever get any third-party controller and it doesn't work on the Switch, the one thing you need to make sure you do is make sure you have Pro Controller wired communication on. Like that's a big one. If that is turned off, controller may not work or function properly. So there is that. Now, analog stick D-pad, they feel just like they did on the previous controllers, and I feel they're mostly fine. The analog stick, we'll get into a game in a second. The analog stick may, you know, have a little bit more travel compared to other controllers, but some people like it. I think it's fine, but that's not my issue. So let me explain. Let's go into test input devices. So I'm gonna hit A, go into test buttons. Now, like I said, the turbo button is minus, that function's fine. Start is plus. I'm not gonna hit clear because that's the home button. A button is the A button, B button is the B button. D-pad functions just fine. All that good stuff. L button, R button, ZL, ZR function just fine. Now these C buttons, let's take a look at what these register as. So the right C button is L3, like as if you had the analog stick and you pushed it in, right? So that's what the right one does. The top one is R3, like if you press this in, which you cannot on this controller. The left one is Y and the bottom one is X. Wonky as heck and not very playable in my opinion for Nintendo Switch games. And you may be saying, yo dude, we can button map in the Switch. And while that is mostly true, you cannot button map this controller. So let me show you that. Change button mapping, hit the A button. There's a reason. Cannot remap. It says it right here. This is that controller. Pro controller is this one that's still synced. This one cannot be remapped. Doesn't freaking matter. So no, you cannot correct any of that, unfortunately. Now, that kind of sucks. It's not recognized as a Pro controller is what the problem is. So if we play a game like Mario 64, okay, mostly it's gonna be playable. Mostly, but it's just kind of wonky. It's strange because you can't change the buttons. So D-pad functions, left analog stick functions, L and R, the Z buttons, all that functions, but just these C buttons are weird, and that's gonna be strange for a lot of games. Some games may be fine. It's just gonna be a case-by-case basis. So overall, can I play this game with this controller? Sure. For the most part, I can. It's not that big of an issue, but overall, as far as use on the Switch, I'm not seeing it. Now, the reason I think this may be like this, where it's not being recognized as a Pro controller and the buttons are kind of mapped weird, is that before I recorded this video, I took the Nintendo 64 version of this, the one that came with the Nintendo 64 dongle, and I synced it to that adapter, and it works just like this does. Kind of makes me wonder, why couldn't they have just released the dongle with the other version to make it multi-purpose? Or with this one, this just seems like it's a repackaged version from the Nintendo 64 where it hasn't been reprogrammed as far as how it functions, because it functions identical to the one that's made for the Nintendo 64, the wireless one for the Nintendo 64. Kind of strange. I mean, I hate to like have to bring up these kind of negatives, but you know, it has to be known before people like spend their money. Is there something I'm missing here? I don't know. I'm not figuring it out. I mean, I've looked through the manual on everything, and I mean, the button layout that it explains in the manual is exactly the button layout that we are experiencing here, and you cannot change. So for me, this is a big no, dog, for the Nintendo Switch. Like, I don't see it being valuable for the Switch at all. Now, I mean, I hate that, and I don't, you know, normally I like to just highlight that product that we're looking at, but as an example, I just have to show with like the Retrobit version that came out, to each their own. Some people prefer this styling over this, and that's fine. I just have to show this quick comparison. So if I plug in this one, which came with the USB dongle and a Nintendo 64 dongle, and I sync it up, let me see, did it sync? Yes, it did. So here we go. Let's go ahead and do a real quick look at the controller options. First, let's go to the test input devices. So A button, B button, down, left, up, right, LR, ZL, ZR, those all function fine. Minus, oh, that's home, this is plus, my bad, I screwed that one up. My bad, because those aren't marked at all, so I kind of just assumed for a second, but the start's going to be, the start button's going to be plus, and that one's home on this one. I've already reviewed this controller. I'm not re-reviewing it or anything like that, but let's see what the C buttons function as, right? So down, so it's X, Y. It's the same thing. It's pretty much the same as this controller, right? Now, the one thing with this, and I'm gonna have to find out, like, can this controller be put in a mode that it is recognized as a Pro controller? Because with this one, if I don't like that layout, which I don't, I really don't, I can go to the change button mapping and it's recognized as a Pro controller and it will allow me to change the buttons around. Like, I could swap everything for how I want it with this one, but on this one, it's not letting me. I just simply plugged it in and synced it, and I noticed that earlier before I recorded this video. I was like, what's up with this? Let me change the buttons, and it doesn't let me. So for me, this is like fine for the PC if you like the style, but for the Switch, for me right now, it's a pass. I don't know if there's firmware update, or maybe, like I said, if I'm wrong on this, my apologies, and I'll update and do a whole new video, but I'm not seeing any information in here on how to like switch to a different mode to make it function like a Pro controller, because I would imagine you just plug it in, sync it, it's in Switch mode because all the buttons react the way the Switch reacts, so, or the way it says in the manual. So it's in the Switch mode, just doesn't not recognize as a Pro controller. Hate to go on and on about it, but yeah, for me, it's a nope, unfortunately. Appreciate you guys watching, and with that said, I will catch you on the next one. Big ass thumb butt, blurry like Bigfoot, and bye-bye.